It had been 2 days since the hospital discharged me. 2 days since the nurses wheeled me out to the curb with a smile and a clipboard, thinking someone was waiting. No one was. I sat on the bench outside with my overnight bag at my feet, the air too warm for early spring. My phone battery had died hours before. I watched taxis come and go. Watched couples reunite. Families arrive with flowers. I watched the world spin on without me. My son had promised he'd pick me up. "No worries, Dad. I got you," he said. But I should have known. His wife had made her feelings clear ever since I moved into the spare room. She didn't say it outright, but her silences were loud. Her sighs after dinner, louder still. Eventually, an old neighbor passing by spotted me. "Mr. Darnell." He gave me a ride home without asking questions, just nodded, helped with my bag, and talked about the weather while I sat quietly, ashamed of my situation. I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth. When we pulled up, I saw their car in the driveway. So they had been home. I thanked him, stepped inside, and was greeted not with relief, not with concern, but with surprise. "Oh," my daughter-in-law said, standing by the sink. "We thought you were staying another night." "I was discharged at 10, I replied. "It's nearly 4. My son appeared from the den, phone in hand. "Man, I'm sorry. Things got busy. I didn't think." "You didn't think," I echoed, lowering myself into the nearest chair. My stitches ached, but not as much as the absence of care. Later that night, they ordered pizza. No one asked if I was hungry. I ate a slice in silence, at the corner of the table, while they scrolled through their phones and laughed at a show I didn't recognize. When their daughter, my granddaughter, Maya, asked if I wanted to play a game, her mother said, "Not tonight, honey. Grandpa's tired." But I wasn't. Not of games. Just of being dismissed. I went to my room early. The room they gave me after my wife passed. It used to be the laundry room. Now it was where they kept old holiday boxes and me. I looked around and felt a quiet pull inside my chest. Not sadness. Something older. Something still. I reached under the bed and pulled out a wooden box. Inside were documents. Copies of the house deed, an old savings certificate, and a notarized statement from years ago when my wife and I had refinanced the home. Back then, we made sure my name stayed on every page. Even when my son moved in, the papers were never altered. The home was still legally mine. I had let them believe otherwise. Out of trust. Out of love. But that trust had worn thin, like the soles of my shoes. I sat down and opened an old notebook. Began to write. Not a letter, not a confrontation. Just thoughts. My hands trembled slightly as I scribbled. But the words came firm. That night, I didn't sleep much. I listened. Listened to the television through the wall, the quiet arguments in the hallway, the sound of my granddaughter laughing upstairs. I wasn't angry. I was awake. Fully. And when dawn cracked open the sky, I was ready. That morning, I offered to take Maya to school. My son shrugged. "Sure, if you're up to it." I was up to it. She skipped ahead of me as we walked. Her little hand would reach back every so often to make sure I was still there. I always was. On the way back, I stopped by a coffee shop and asked to use their printer. Sent an email to an old friend, now a lawyer, asking for a meeting. I scanned and attached the deed. Added a few lines about what I needed to confirm. I signed it, with steady hand, Walter. When I returned home, my daughter-in-law was on the phone in the kitchen. "Yes, yes," she whispered. "We'll get it listed soon. Just have to handle the old man's stuff first." She paused when she saw me. Forced a smile. "Morning." "Good morning," I said, walking past. She didn't know I'd heard everything. That evening I made dinner. Just for myself. An old recipe, meatloaf and potatoes. The way my wife used to make it. I set the table for one and ate slowly. No one joined me. No one asked why. Afterward, I sat in the living room with a photo album. Maya came and climbed beside me. "Is that Grandma?" she asked, pointing to a picture. I nodded. She made the best lemon pie. Can you make it? I can try. She smiled. I miss her, and I never even met her. I miss her every day, I whispered. She leaned on my shoulder, and we sat like that, pages turning slow. Later, I went to my room, folded the documents back into the box, and placed it beside the door. The box looked small, but it carried something heavy: proof, memory, intent. Tomorrow I'd meet my lawyer. But tonight I'd let the quiet do its work. I wasn't invisible, just underestimated. And that was about to change. If you found something familiar in Walter's story, if his silence echoes something you've lived through, then maybe you understand what it means to be quietly pushed aside. If these stories speak to you, stories of dignity, quiet strength, and reclaiming what's yours, please subscribe to Life Untold. Because sometimes the stories that aren't shouted are the ones we need most. The night passed like a fog, thick, quiet, and full of memories that refused to sleep. I lay on the couch, the same one I used to nap on when Maya was a newborn, back when they still needed me, or at least acted like it. I shifted onto my side, careful not to disturb the fresh scar from surgery, and watched the hallway stretch into darkness like a road leading nowhere. Morning didn't come with any kindness. No warm greetings or hushed concern. Just the sound of dishes clinking and the distant voice of my daughter-in-law talking on speakerphone. I sat up slowly. My joints groaned in protest, but I ignored them. I had spent a lifetime pushing through pain. This would be no different. I boiled water for tea. The old kettle still wheezed when it reached its crescendo. I poured the hot water into the thick ceramic mug I'd brought from my house. My real house. The one with the cedar porch swing and the oak tree I planted when my wife was pregnant with our son. That home knew love, even in silence. This one only knew convenience and cold efficiency. I sipped slowly, standing near the window. Outside, the front yard was all mulch and decorative stones now. Not a patch of grass or flower in sight. Just curated emptiness. My son came down the stairs in a hurry, adjusting his tie. He paused when he saw me. "You good?" he asked without looking. "I'm managing," I said. He nodded, already out the door. Later, Maya wandered into the living room, rubbing her eyes and clutching a blanket with cartoon ducks on it. She was the only warmth left in this house. She climbed into the armchair across from me and asked, "Grandpa, can you walk today?" "Some," I said. "But not far. I can get your book." I smiled. "You're a good girl." She returned with my dog-eared copy of The Old Man and the Sea, a story I never tired of. I flipped to the marked page and read a few lines, my voice raspy from both age and ache. Maya listened, then drifted to sleep curled up on the rug. Her presence grounded me more than any pain pill ever could. It wasn't until the afternoon that I found out what they were planning. I had gone to the mailbox on the front stoop. There, buried among glossy coupons and insurance offers, was a thick envelope with my name spelled wrong. Just one letter off, but enough to catch my eye. I opened it slowly. A letter from a real estate agency. "Per your inquiry," it began, detailing their home valuation services and confirming an upcoming inspection date. I stood still for a long time. Back inside, I sat on the edge of the guest bed and stared at my own cane leaning against the wall. The same one I used to help my neighbor across the street after his fall. The same one I had to fight to get covered by Medicare. My son hadn't mentioned anything about selling the house. Neither had she. But clearly they were already halfway through the process. They were erasing me, softly, quietly, like I was dust on a shelf. When they came home, I didn't ask anything. I didn't yell. I just made myself dinner in the pan they said was too old to keep. The same one my wife used to fry eggs on Sunday mornings. They watched me from the kitchen like I was the past they couldn't wait to forget. That night, I made my decision. I retrieved the folder from the lining of my suitcase. Not the medical one, no, the other one. The folder with the copies of the house deed from years ago, before I let my son handle the paperwork. I reviewed every clause of the reverse mortgage agreement and reread the small notes I'd scrawled in the margins during my meetings with the family lawyer. I had insisted the paperwork include contingencies. He'd said I was paranoid. Turns out I was just prepared. I folded the papers neatly and slid them into a new envelope labeled with a single word: return. The next morning, I called the lawyer. Same number, same slow voice. "Mr. Ellison," he greeted. "Didn't expect your call. I need to reinstate a clause," I said. "And I need it done quietly." He didn't ask why. He just gave me an appointment and reminded me to bring the original document. It's easier if you show, not tell. Later that day, while they were out at brunch, I left the house with my cane and the envelope, hailing a cab with more dignity than I'd felt in years. The law office hadn't changed. Still smelled like polished wood and paper. I sat across from Mr. Kendrick, the man who helped me buy my first house. He looked over the folder and raised an eyebrow. "You always did think 3 steps ahead," he said. "Now I need those 3 steps to mean something." We filed the amendment, reactivating the ownership contingency. As long as I was alive, the house couldn't be sold or transferred without my signed approval. Not digitally, not in ink, not at all. I added a second clause this time. If any transaction was attempted behind my back, the ownership reverted immediately to me under breach. "Does your family know?" Kendrick asked. "They don't need to," I said. "Not yet." That evening, I returned to the house with 2 copies of the updated papers. One I slid into the drawer next to my Bible. The other I tucked into the back pocket of my journal. At dinner, they spoke about trivial things: school fundraisers, vacation plans, a friend who just bought a Tesla. I nodded politely. I passed the salt. I even complimented the potatoes. But inside, I was already gone. After the dishes were cleared, Maya tugged on my sleeve. "Will you read me a story, Grandpa?" I took her hand and walked her to her room, every step a confirmation. I read to her slowly, the way my father used to read to me. She fell asleep before the 3rd page. I watched her chest rise and fall, then gently closed the book. Downstairs, my son and his wife sat in front of the TV, a real estate show on pause. I didn't speak. I just stood behind them for a moment, then turned and went to bed. Not defeated. Just ready. Ready for what came next. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because of pain, though there was still plenty of that, but because sleep couldn't quiet the noise in my mind. Thoughts pacing the floorboards of my memory. Images of my wife, my son as a boy, the house when it used to smell like stew and wood polish instead of antiseptic hand wash. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the soft pool of moonlight on the floor and listening to the hum of a home that no longer felt like mine. Before dawn, I got up, dressed slowly, and went out to the porch with my journal and a thermos of black coffee. The air was still and damp, the kind that settles on your shoulders and whispers that summer is slipping into fall. I opened the red journal, its spine softened with age, and began writing again. Not out of bitterness, out of clarity. This was no longer about revenge. It was about restoration. I wrote about how my wife used to hum while cooking, how she'd pull me into a slow dance in the middle of the kitchen, apron and all. I wrote about the first time I held my son, how small and fierce he felt in my arms. And then I wrote about now. About silence passed off as politeness, avoidance masked as busyness. A man can tell when he's being slowly pushed aside. And I wasn't going to fade quietly. Mid-morning, the appraiser came again. This time, I greeted her at the door. "You're back early," I said. She smiled, professional and curious. "Just needed some final details." My son appeared from behind me, clearly not expecting to see me standing there. "Dad, you don't need to worry about this. Just some standard stuff." I looked at the appraiser. "Do you need anything from me directly?" She hesitated, glanced at him, then back at me. "Actually, yes. It would help to confirm who the listed owner is." "That would be me," I said, handing her a copy of the revised deed. Her eyes flicked over it. She nodded. My son stood frozen. You're serious about this?" he asked, his voice low. I met his gaze. "I was serious the day I signed it. You just weren't listening." She thanked me and left, leaving a silence thick enough to chew. "You blindsided me," he said. "Why? Why go behind our backs?" "Behind your back?" I almost laughed. "You mean like scheduling appraisals behind mine? Like speaking about nursing homes while I was recovering on your couch? This isn't behind anyone's back. This is me standing in front of you, finally." He walked off, muttering. His wife didn't say a word. Just avoided my eyes and returned to scrolling through her phone. That night, Maya found me sitting in the backyard. She carried a blanket and sat next to me without saying anything. We watched the stars try to peek through the city glow. "Why is everyone so mad?" she asked. I sighed. "Because sometimes people think they know what's best. But they forget to ask others what they actually need." She nodded slowly. Then she leaned her head on my arm. "I like it when you're here," she said. "You make the house feel less weird." I chuckled softly. "Thanks, Peanut. That means a lot." She fell asleep under my arm. I stayed there for an hour, listening to her breathe, watching the stars blink one by one into the dark. The following day, I made a phone call. Not to a lawyer. To a moving company. Quietly, I arranged for my old things, what little I still owned, to be transferred to a new address. Not the house. A small apartment complex downtown, near the old library. I'd seen it months back and thought about it like a dream I wasn't allowed to have. Now I claimed it. I didn't announce it. Didn't make a scene. Just began clearing drawers, packing up memories and essentials. I left the porcelain dishes. I took the wooden chess set. I left the smart TV. I took the journals. The only conversation I had was with Maya. I told her I was moving somewhere quieter, with better sunlight, and a garden of my own. "Can I visit?" she asked. "Anytime," I said. "You'll always have a spot at my table." On moving day, I left a note on the fridge. Simple. Kind. Final. "I raised this family with love and patience. I will now live the rest of my life with peace and choice. Thank you for the memories." I walked out with nothing but 2 suitcases and my cane. But it felt like freedom. Not escape. Not retreat. Freedom. My new apartment greeted me like an old friend. Modest, but full of light. I unpacked slowly, placing books by genre and tea by mood. I hung one photo, me and my wife dancing in the kitchen, flower on her nose. It was the only art I needed. That night, I sat on my little balcony, jasmine tea steaming in my mug, and wrote in the red journal again. "I am not forgotten. I am not finished. I am home. Let me know when you're ready for part 4, and I'll continue the story in the same voice and pace." The next morning arrived quietly, cloaked in a gentle fog that made everything outside the window appear soft-edged and slow. I sat up on the couch, a blanket tangled at my feet, the imprint of sleep still creased across my face. My bones ached less today, though not from healing, but from something closer to clarity. I brewed a pot of black coffee, the kind I used to make when I worked double shift. Strong. Bitter. Steady. As the scent filled the kitchen, I leaned against the counter and listened. The house was still. The kind of still that meant they were avoiding me. And that was fine. I had no interest in confrontations anymore. I was done yelling into rooms that had already decided what they wanted to hear. That morning, I went through my suitcase again, this time not to pack, but to organize. I laid out my essentials with the same care I once gave to setting surgical tools in perfect order. The journal went on top. That red journal held my truth now, and I wasn't about to misplace it. I took out my old army dog tags and held them for a long while. There were things I had survived that my son would never understand, that he never asked about. Around noon, Maya tiptoed into the kitchen. She always approached with the kind of softness only children possess, as if she instinctively knew how loud the world already was. She pointed to the bookshelf. "Grandpa, can I take the owl book to school?" The one you used to read when I was sick. I nodded. It's yours now. Take good care of it. She grinned, and for a moment, the house didn't feel so heavy. But just as quickly, the front door clicked. My son stepped inside, talking on his phone. From the sound of it, he was trying to explain delays to someone. Then he saw me. "Dad," he said, lowering the phone. "We need to talk." "Do we?" I asked, not unkindly. "Yes. About the house. About the appraisal yesterday. About what you said." I said very little, I reminded him. But I meant all of it. He gestured toward the dining room, and I followed him. The same table where we used to eat Sunday pot roasts now served as a makeshift war room. He had papers spread out, a laptop open with spreadsheets. "Look," he said, pointing at the numbers. "If we can just hold off on anything legal for a few weeks, I can restructure some things. It doesn't have to be messy." "Messy for whom?" I asked. He paused, confused. "For all of us. For Maya." "You mean for you," I said. "And I get it. But no. That ship's sailed." He leaned back in his chair. "Why now? After all this time?" I looked at the window, the yard overgrown, the lawn chair still half buried in leaves. "Because I finally realized staying silent was costing me more than speaking up ever could." That night, we didn't speak over dinner. Maya sat between us, blissfully unaware of the shift. Or maybe she knew more than she let on. Children have a way of noticing the unspoken. Later, I pulled out the journal again and jotted down what I called final notices. Not to them, but to myself. Promises that I would no longer delay peace for the comfort of others. I listed the name of the retirement community I'd toured last year. I wrote down the contact information of a woman I met at the VFW who ran a local book club. I wasn't leaving out of spite. I was simply moving toward something that resembled freedom. The following day, I received a call from the lawyer. He confirmed the amendment had been filed. My name stood uncontested. The property couldn't be sold without my notarized approval. Not bypassed. Not erased. Just as it should have always been. In the afternoon, I baked cornbread. The same recipe my late wife loved. As the smell filled the kitchen, Maya wandered in and hugged my waist. "Grandpa, are we still going to the park this weekend?" "Of course," I said. "That hasn't changed." And in that moment, I realized something important. I wasn't just reclaiming a house. I was reclaiming the role of grandfather. Not the live-in help. Not the quiet ghost who washed dishes and didn't speak unless spoken to. I was her grandfather. And that meant something. That night, I lit a single candle and placed it by the window. Not for anyone to see, but for myself. A symbol. A small flame of return. The story wasn't over. Not yet. But the house had shifted. The ground beneath us was no longer theirs alone. And soon I would make my final choice. Not out of anger, but because I could. Let me know when you're ready for part 5, and I'll bring the story to its final chapter. I spent the first evening in my new apartment in silence. Not because I lacked words, but because silence had become my companion, one that did not interrupt, did not belittle, did not expect me to explain myself. I made a simple dinner: scrambled eggs, toast, and tea. The kind of meal no one ever thanked me for, but one I always made with care. I sat by the window and looked out at the row of sycamore trees lining the street. The sky was the soft orange of a sun that understood something about aging. It didn't burn like it used to, but it still lit the world just fine. I let the light fall across the stack of books I had brought, and beside them, a photo of Marjorie, my wife. Her smile still knew how to reach me. The days that followed were slow, but not lonely. I bought a potted plant from the corner florist and named it Will, short for willpower. I rearranged my books by years I read them rather than alphabetically. I called the utility company and got the account under my name. I was building something, not just a home, but a presence. One morning, as I stood on my little balcony sipping my usual black coffee, a letter arrived. Slipped beneath the door. No postage. Just handwriting I recognized. It was from my son. Dad, I know I failed you. I see it now. I see everything I ignored. You gave us everything and we treated you like background noise. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'd like to ask, when you're ready, if I might come by. Not to talk about money. Not the house. Just to visit. Just to see you. I miss you. I held the letter in my hands for a long time. Not because I needed time to process it, but because I needed time to feel it. I read it twice, then set it aside. Healing, I had learned, doesn't come when someone else says sorry. It comes when you stop needing them to. That afternoon, I walked to the park nearby, where I'd seen families sit under tall oak. There were children playing, couples strolling, and a man my age sketching a woman's silhouette into a leather journal. I took a seat on a bench and listened, to the laughter, to the breeze, to the part of me that had been quiet for so long it had forgotten its own voice. I began visiting the park every afternoon. Some days I brought a sandwich. Some days I brought nothing but time. A week later, I joined a chess group. They played slow, with commentary and memory. Nobody asked what I used to do, or why my hands shook slightly when I moved to Bishop. They just played. We talked about books, jazz, the good years, and the bad ones. One of them, Harold, said, "It's good to finally meet men who've seen some things and don't need to prove anything." I nodded. I knew exactly what he meant. On a Saturday morning, a knock came at my door. It was Maya. Alone. "Hi, Grandpa," she said, holding a small bag of cookies. "Mom said I could come." I opened the door and stepped aside. "You're always welcome here." She wandered around the apartment with curiosity, touching the books, peeking at the potted plant, flipping through the chessboard. She stopped at the framed photo of me in uniform. "You look like a superhero." I chuckled. Some days I felt like one. Other days I was just trying to make it to the next. She nodded, though I knew she didn't fully understand. Still, she saw me. Not as a background character, not as a fixture in someone else's life. She saw me. We baked together badly. She told me about school. I told her about the time I snuck out of base to see Marjorie one winter night. When she left, she hugged me tight. "Grandpa, I hope you don't stay mad forever." "I'm not mad," I said. "I'm just, finally home." A few days later, her father came by. He didn't knock. He stood on the other side of the door, letter in hand. I opened it without saying a word. "I've got no defense, Dad," he said. "But I want to try again. Not to fix the past. Just to be better in the time we've got left." We sat on the couch. No dramatic confessions. Just two men sitting in a room they both knew was built from silence and second chances. I didn't make him apologize again. I didn't lecture. We talked about the war. About the time he broke his arm trying to skateboard down the driveway. About how Marjorie used to sing even when she burned dinner. That night, I wrote in my journal again. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending it never happened. It means choosing what still deserves your energy. Today, I chose to remember the good parts. I read that entry again the next morning and added one more line. I may have been invisible to them for years, but now I see myself, and that is enough. Weeks passed. The apartment settled around me like a favorite coat. I attended Sunday services again. Joined a senior writing group. Baked a pie so bad the neighbors gave me a cookbook. Life wasn't grand, but it was mine. Sometimes, when I walked past the mirror, I would stop, not to fix my shirt or flatten my hair, but to see the man looking back. A man who had raised a son, buried a wife, nursed strangers, lost his place and reclaimed it. A man who had once been overlooked and now chose not to overlook himself. To anyone listening, maybe you know what it feels like to be needed only when convenient, to be thanked with silence, expected to sacrifice without recognition. Maybe you know what it feels like to be dismissed, sidelined, treated like a relic instead of a person. Let me tell you something. You are not broken for wanting peace. You are not selfish for stepping back. You are not cruel for saying no. Your life isn't a supporting role in someone else's story. It's your story. And if the world stopped listening to you, then maybe it's time to listen to yourself. So thank you for staying through this quiet telling of a quiet man who had one more story left in him. And if you, too, have felt invisible, just know you are not alone. Pull up a chair, take a breath, and remember, your voice doesn't need to be loud to matter. Sometimes it just needs to be heard. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of your worth, your resilience, or someone you love, please consider subscribing to Life Untold. These stories are more than memories. They're reminders that silence holds truth, that dignity can be reclaimed, and that sometimes the softest voices carry the strongest echoes.